business of stealing.
Rock band.
Burn it on the X. Hi, folks. Welcome back to Heard It on the X, the East Coast premier music talk show. We're on the line right now with Ron Hawkins. Ron, how long have you painted for, my friend?
Since about 2001.
Oh, really? So it's relatively new.
Yeah, I used to, like lots of kids. I've got a 4.5-year-old daughter, and all her friends they draw like crazy. So I was like that when I was a little kid, till about 8 or 9, and then didn't really do much art. And then in 2001, I was in a gallery with my partner Jill, and we were talking about art. And she said, "Wow, you're really into this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I go to galleries all over the world. Anytime I tour, I usually go to more visual art galleries than see bands, actually." And and then my next birthday came up, and she bought me all kinds of art supplies, and I was looking at them, kind of like, "Oh my God, I hope I'm serious enough about this."
You're immensely talented. It's amazing to me that it's only been. I mean, you really are immensely talented. If you go to ronhawkins.com, you can see some of Ron's art, and you're immensely talented.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I find it's a great corollary to music, because it's a lot like music in some ways, and then there are ways that it's completely like you get really immersed in it. Like I sit in front of a painting and get up like 8 hours later, 6 hours later, and look at the clock and go, "Holy crap!" I can't believe that much time flew by, and I'm sort of out of myself.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you feel Canada has a friendlier attitude toward the arts than the States? I mean, you spend a lot of time in both countries, and not knocking America's view on things. Just do you find that it seems to me, obviously, you're my backyard too, so it just seems like there's a friendlier attitude toward the arts in Canada, where maybe you're exposed to them or encouraged more in Canada than here.
I think it's completely 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, because I think in Canada has more social programs for art, and maybe more grant. I don't know for sure about this, but my assumption is that Canada has more bureaucratic friendliness towards art in terms of grants and things like that you can get in Canada to be an artist. But you can't sort of balk at the track record of the United States. I mean, the U.S. is basically New York was basically and possibly is the art center of the world. After World War II, since Paris, there was Paris and then there was New York, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't really argue with the fact that I think America's maybe tougher on artists and doesn't give them as much help. But I think maybe the dog eat dog aspect of art in America really makes for great art. There's great American artists.
Yeah, and maybe the opposition, or like you say, just the fact that that there isn't someone helping you makes for great, better artists. Who knows? Who knows what the answer to that one is? I got to tell you,
the funny thing is, there's a lot of great art coming out of Canada, a lot of great art coming out of Toronto, and because Toronto's a really major cultural center. But there's an awful lot of great Canadian art coming out of Winnipeg, which, my wife Jill is from Winnipeg, and it's a very cold, small place where, and it turns out way more artists than a city that size should. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's the same sort of thing. It's kind of tough in Winnipeg, and the winters are really hard, and people sort of lock themselves up in their studios and get down to it.
Yeah, it's funny because I've always had a theory that the level of talent in Buffalo. I travel a lot all over the country, and sometimes I'm floored when I go to a cities at the lack of talent. That in a city where I would expect there to be quite a lot of talent, and I'm floored, and I think to myself, maybe I'm just here on a bad night. But the level of talent in Western New York has always floored me, and I think part of the reason why is that the people that do it here do it for love. Like you say, they're locked in their houses a lot of times. They're practicing their instruments, recording in their home studios. I just think it's it has definitely an effect on that type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I have to say from being in Buffalo as often as I have, it's a lot like Toronto. Like, there's a lot to write about in Toronto and Buffalo. I mean, just on a street level. And I think that's one thing that Lois of the Low put on the map in Canada, was that there weren't people that were cocky enough or interested enough, maybe in their cities as world cities, to write about Toronto, let's say, as in the way that somebody might write about New York or Paris or somewhere. I think we were, we weren't the first, but I mean, we were one of the few bands that actually, mentioned street names in our cities and talked about landmarks in our cities as romantic places that could inspire you.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that comes down to, and don't downplay the fact that you're a brilliant lyricist. I mean, you have the ability, There's guys out there, Springsteen, even Mick Jagger, I throw in this category. Mick Jagger can write lyrics still to this day. I mean, Mick Jagger's been rich for almost his entire life. I mean,
Yeah.
but he can still write lyrics like every man. Springsteen, the same way. He writes lyrics that mean something to just about every guy out there, and I think you're the same way, my friend. I think that you're a immensely talented wordsmith.
Well, thanks. I would have to say that, again, there's a similarity between Jagger's upbringing, as far as I know it, and or maybe guys like John Lennon and Bruce Springsteen and me, like all grew up in working class neighborhoods, and again, like Toronto and Buffalo bear that same. They're sort of former industrial cities that have that kind of feeling. Like there's a kind of hard Scrabble Street sort of vibe. And, but again, to speak of it, I'm pretty confident as a lyricist, but I can say that in the 80s, in my band before Lowest of the Low, I used to try and tackle, like, really big worldly issues, a la sometimes the way Bono does or whatever, and found that, I could write interesting things about that, but it wasn't until I just kind of brought it all home to a smaller kind of microcosmic level and talked about the people I knew in my city and talked about my city. You can still say those big things, but you funnel them through the smaller, more real to you, kind of real to your heart. Like, there's no point in me writing about Soweto, South Africa.
Right.
It's better if I want to say something about the situation going on there. It's better for me to find a way in my own neighborhood to talk about it, and then I think it comes across more honestly. And I think that's what happened with Lowest of the Low. I turned some corner as a lyricist and started to bring it all to a micro level instead of a macro level. And the minute I did that and started talking about people I knew in my own neighborhoods and stuff like that, it sort of resonated with people more.
Yeah, that's great advice for anybody that's listening to the show. I mean, that's people who are having trouble writing lyrics that mean something to them. To break that down to brass tacks, write lyrics that mean something to you. Write lyrics that have importance to you, and maybe people can make that fit into their life too. I got to tell you a quick story, and I know you have to go. Where are you going? Where do you got to go judge something in indie music?
Something in Toronto called Indie Week, and I did a panel yesterday. I get calls like this. Like yesterday, they said, "Ron, we want you to be on this panel," and I'm like, "What's it called?" And they're like, "It's called Been There, Done That." And I'm like, "Oh, I get it." They get all the sort of the road weary guys who have done it backward and forward and have a bunch of horror stories to tell. It's like, so I did that panel yesterday, and today I'm doing a band judging thing for Indie Week, and it's cool. It's like I love, I get off the stage and I talk to a bunch of people that are like 20 years old or 18 years old, and they're in bands. One guy was 16 years old, and he'd just come across from Dublin, and he was saying your stories are inspired me, and I said, you got to take everything I said up there with a grain of salt. I tend to be the guy who's sort of dissing the music industry a little more maybe than I need to. And he's like, no, but it's good. I need to know these things, and
It's got to be a great feeling to know that you're affecting people that way. And like I say, I want to remind everybody, October 23rd at the Mohawk Place, stop down and see somebody who I consider to be, really modern times one of the best wordsmiths out there. So here's my quick story, and I know you got to go. You're playing this powder keg rally last year. I own a local music store here on top of having the show. So my store sponsored a kids stage. I tried to stay down there as long as I could, but I actually had to play out in Williamsville that night. So I'm out in Williamsville. The lovely Kim Marie, the producer of the show, is down there. Now, she's supposed to meet me out in Williamsville. So I'm wondering why, she hasn't shown up. All of a sudden, I get a picture of you on a stage from really far away. And there was a ton of people down there. Tens of thousands of people down there. A little bit later, I get a picture on my cell phone, and it's you, and she's like practically on the stage with you. Then I get a picture about an hour later, and it's you and her, I think over at the Pearl Street Pub. No. I'm not. Where was it?
Where was it?
In front of the stage.
It was in front of the stage. Okay. So it was just like, wow. I think I just lost my girlfriend to Ron Hawkins. So I just
rushed by a traveling musician.
She loved that show, and her friend, I have to mention her name. Her friend Kim Luchek is probably one of your biggest fans in this area, and they were just floored by that show. And I know that both of them are going to be down at the Mohawk Place. Ron, I want to thank you for taking some time, and if you don't mind, we'd like to check in with you periodically and see what you're up to. Is
Maybe
that okay?
when the album comes out.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pleasure, guys, and thanks a lot for doing this because it's just great to talk about stuff and be on the radio and what's left of good radio.
Well, and like I say, the whole idea of the show is we're gonna give musicians a format to talk about stuff, so you don't have to search around for things, So
right.
It's just an honor to have you on, and really, I think the world of you and your talent. Can't wait for this show. Thanks again for stopping by,